is working. Thanks. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the final module installment of Now. We are actually smushing together four different chapters together. I have split them apart because I thought five sounded better than four. And I was trying roughly to stick it to two chapters to each module. But because I was not available on January 1st, we're smushing now together. So welcome. So we're going to be talking about chapter 5, chapter 6, chapter 7, and chapter 8, which I'd like to point out is a lot of room to cover. So I'm curious, and what I would like to do to start off with, and I'm going to try and set up the live streamy situation. We'll see if that works. But what I thought I would do is from where you started when you were like, oh, this will be a fun way to start off the year, right? It's January. Let's do that little Jessica's little thing. You've done Jessica's little thing to whatever degree you have done it. For the record, if you haven't finished the book, I don't care. You already bought it. So at the pace in which you have gone, at the stuff that you have done, and the stuff that you haven't done, which is completely fine, I'm curious, how are you today compared to where you were when you originally thought, this is a great way to like take responsibility for who and how I am? Here I come, 2021. So why don't I just open it up and y'all see or add or whatever you need to, and I'll get the live stream up and going.
So
I would say that.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no. I would say that I'm just much more aware. Like I'm super, super aware of like how I'm being in any given situation. Maybe more than I thought I would be.
Great.
So I felt really like beat down at the end of December, exhausted from work, exhausted from other responsibilities. And I mean, multiple decisions, very intentional decisions to make some changes in the new year. And I think this book club just even committing multiple Friday nights to it, I'm like, okay, I'm going to start doing some things for me to take care of me, because I can't do well in other parts of my life if I'm not taking care of myself. And so it's helped me kind of refresh, and it's also helped me stop accepting excuses from other people. And so my big thing is holding other people more accountable, because it affects like our entire team at work, but it affects me at home too. I'm having to do a lot of extra work and spend a lot of extra hours that I could be doing other things I really want to do instead of making up other people's work. So it's been kind of like this big opening of this shell that I've had, kind of tightly clasped, and it's been really refreshing, and I'm feeling a lot better, just mentally, emotionally, physically. I'm just making those commitments and starting to see some progress.
Well, that's terrible news. Anybody else want to jump in?
I can go. I'm using the concept of head, heart, and action a lot. I feel like I'm really thinking about that, and also just pushing down on the pedal and thinking like, okay, this is good enough right now. And it feels really good. I feel before I used to think I need to be perfect before doing something, and it was always never perfect. It just, now I just do it faster and I do more. So I like it.
That's very cool. It's interesting because you used the pedal. Was the gas pedal one of the things that you have found useful to kind of employ? You mentioned the model head, heart, and action, but it sounds like it's more the gas pedal of like accelerating and slowing down.
Yeah, a lot more, because action is my third rail. So gas pedal works really well because I'm like, okay, done. Like I've thought about it. I've, it's been in my head, and now it's time to push on the pedal and move forward with an action.
Awesome. That's cool. Anyone else have any like thoughts about, you started or you ended 2020, you thought, oh, I'll do this fun little book club. What a way to start the 2021 year. And now here you are at the end of January. To be completely honest, I don't know how that part happened, but it's the end of January and it's the end of the book club, or at least the end of this particular book club. Spoiler alert, I will be doing this again. Any other kind of thoughts or comments that really talk about, like, I mean, y'all have done such a great job of like where you were and where you are, and also like where aren't you, right? Like, did you think this would solve all of your problems and maybe there's still a few left or something?
Well, I just want to kind of carry on from what Hillary said, because when she was talking, I was like connecting. For me, I did so much expanding in 2020 because I had time and because there were so many things going on that I wanted to know about and learn about. So this book club became a really nice transition period. And also, you know, that what was going on in the book, back to what Alan said about, you have all this information, you know, it's like the proverbial student that just keeps going to school, like it's sometime you actually have to do something with that, you know, to change yourself and the world around you. So this was a really nice transition time for me to think about, okay, you learned all this, and now what are you going to do with it? How are you going to move forward to it? And I thought I really had a lot of grace for myself and people around me, but I'm learning that I can expand on that as well. I'm noticing kind of what Dara was saying. I'm noticing a lot more when I don't have grace for people, or when other people, you know, it's interesting to me to have conversations with people who think they're on the right side, whatever that may be.
Mhm.
And the way they deal with the people on the other side is the same thing they say they don't like about the other side, whatever that may be in whatever situation. So I'm noticing that a lot more. And I'm very uncomfortable with that, much more than I was before. I'm noticing that a lot more. So transition.
Yeah. Well, I really like I like using the word noticing. And I think like if we take the mantra of do the best you can with what you got some of the time, it involves noticing to make sure that that's actually what you're doing, right? And in order to notice that you're doing the best you can with what you got some of the time, you're going to have to know what is like superb behavior. Okay, I'm not doing that, just noticing it. But what is like, I will notice you're not doing that, right? So doing the best you can, like what would be ideal, what would be terrible, so you're floating somewhere in the middle. What if like 100% perfection was achievable? Spoiler alert, it's not. Okay, but what about never, right? Never, ever, ever. That's not good. So you're still floating kind of in the middle, but you can't regulate that middle zone if you're not noticing both ends of the spectrum that you generally set for yourself. But doing that and noticing is like the stickiest habit. So like I make jokes that this is why people no one ever invites me to go to movies. Remember movies? But no one ever invites me to go to movies because I can't turn my lenses off very easily. So I often have my friends have to be like, Jessica, clock out. We are going to a movie for recreational purposes, right? And so like when I remember, for the record, when we saw Alien versus Predator, case that's on your movie watching list, I'd scratch it off. But we had to go because it was my husband's birthday and there's things blow up and they're fighting and they're aliens and predators. Definitely must catch that flick. So after the movie, when I was asked, so what you think about the movie? And my immediate response was, well, the ethnically ambiguous sheriff wasn't the first person to die. That is called a buzzkill. It's true. And I noticed it. And I also noticed that my invitations to movies were on a steep decline after that. So that is my responsibility, right? Like, I'm not saying that racism is not present in movies. I'm saying that that is a different workshop. This was supposed to be a recreational movie. You can be critical, but maybe not out of the gate, right? Like maybe say like, Wow. It was less gory, largely because the lighting is so bad, you just hear death and bones, but you can't see it. See how much better that is? No. No one invites me to movies, and that's fine. I don't like watching your movies anyway. So if we are going to talk about how we're taking noticing and just noticing from the beginning to I'm not going to say the end, but wherever you're currently at, that in itself is a noticing. If we're going to do this, I want us to be able to pay attention to how we, including me, because I've been going through this process as well, is what are we doing now? Like, we're not going to fix everything. We're not even really going to fix very much about ourselves, because y'all are going to forget entirely that this even existed. Anita, you started us off with, I got this book a long time ago, right? And it's fine. Like, this was the right time to do it. You've been a great participant. You've done all the homework in Canvas. You are a brown noser, my kind of student. Excellent, right? But it's the right time for you to do it now, not at some other time when you evidently thought it was the right time. This is the right time. So yay. Thank you very much for being here. It's been quite a journey. Thank you for spending your Fridays with me. So with that, I'm going to just start rolling through some of the questions and see what people come up with, because the whole point of this is to really role model what it means to like take care of yourself and to be responsible for yourself. And just like the flow chart on page 192, which is usually people's favorite part for better connections, it's not a linear process. It is repetitive and cyclical, and you're going to back up and go forward and start over and skip steps and start again. And welcome to the messiness of self-reflection. So we'll start off first with a softball question, which is, how does your past inform how you habitually respond in the present? There's an easy one for you. How's your past show up today?
Jess, I've been also through my work had an opportunity to enroll in the online version of Crucial Conversations based on the book, and you talk about the book. I don't remember where. I was like, oh, here's Jess talking about the book that I'm doing.
I love it. I love that book. It's great.
And yeah, I'm just doing the online and the modules and kind of the workshop-y parts, and then I'm going to get the book. So anyway, it's really your book, and that is really bringing up again, or bringing up more to the front for this notion of what I'm reacting to in this moment, in this conversation, in this situation in a relationship doesn't have to do with what's happening right now. It has to do with something that happened when I was, 30, 12, 6. I mean, who knows? And your example in the book about painting, I could really relate to that. I was like, oh, wow. And I'm glad you were able to figure out why did you have that reaction, and had that moment. But I think it impacts us a lot, and we're not always thinking about it. We tell ourselves a story about the person or a situation. We kind of fill in all the gaps, sometimes just based on what we're seeing or what, a sentence that we just heard, and we just fill in the whole story and react, I think, to that. So I'm sad the book club's over. I'm going to read the book more slowly. I read it a little speedily to be able to participate, but I think there's a lot to think about there.
Mm-hmm. Well, and what I think is interesting is when we talk about Jim had some really great comments on the Canvas about curiosity, generosity, vulnerability, and authenticity. But I feel like our experiences, our memories, our habits are time travelers, right? And so you're not even necessarily conscious that something has tripped something, and now you have like swooshed back, right? So like using the painting example briefly. So it's not that I'm not used to my husband having like suggestions or ideas of ways I should do something that I disagree with or find unsolicited, even if I ask for them, and vice versa, right? But what was interesting was that the area in which he was commenting involved painting with newspaper on grass. And the next thing I knew, I was in 4th grade being yelled at by the bully on my street right? And my husband was not responsible for that. I honestly am responsible for that, but I didn't even notice what was happening, right? Fortunately, I was painting those lawn chairs as a break of writing this book because there was so much to think about that in the moment, literally, I was like, wait a minute. Is this Brian Cooksey showing up again? Aha, it is, right? So then like, that's also not Brian Cooksey's fault, just in case you're watching this. It's not your fault either. You probably don't even know what an impact you made that 30, it can't be 30 years, math, many decades later that would come up again, right? So when curiosity, generosity, vulnerability, and authenticity, I think, are used like consciously, then I feel like there's a forward, positive, futuristic, like, all right, this is how I'm going to choose. But when something trips them, then we don't always notice where our habits come from, I think. So what about you? How do those variables, specifically curiosity, generosity, vulnerability, and authenticity, how do they impact your ability to have powerful conversations, the forward ones and the negative ones? Does it change if you're the speaker or the listener or the observer?
I think for me, it makes it easier. I think if I go into a conversation with an agenda and without curiosity and generosity and interest, I think I feel like a lot more pressure to do certain things. I have a goal, I have an agenda. But if I'm going into it with openness and curiosity and trying to learn, I feel like I feel more relaxed because it's just genuinely trying to understand it. But it takes kind of mindfulness to be there and not to react. And about the concept of like the past impacting the present, I feel like people are lucky who can make that connection of the bully in middle school. I think usually it's so complex that it's an unknown cause or unknown source from the past that shows up. It takes a lot of introspection to figure out why did I react so strongly towards this? And people who can find out the source are very lucky, but I think often it's so difficult to figure that out.
I've also find I would add is that sometimes like your closest friends, they'll notice the habit, but they only notice the habit in the tenure of their existence with you. So they might think, oh, remember that thing that happened in college? That's showing up. But it's your job to realize college is actually from middle school, right? So like you can have your checks and balances, but when they say it, is there something that even happened before then? And I'm not like a psychologist or psychotherapist or something, but it was really fascinating when I started really tracing these things back. And when you map out your crucible moments, right, that, oh, something is happening here. And I shared at the beginning that all of this came from my own burnout because I was tired of doing really bad, ineffective diversity trainings. And when we kind of start shifting to start talking about failure or rejection or something like this, there is an interesting thing that happened in that. So I was lucky enough that like I get to speak on stage. Remember those things, right? So like I used to use airplanes and suitcases and little baby tubes of toothpaste. I don't even know where I put them, but I have many of them somewhere. And while I was writing this book, I was like testing out what I was talking about, what was going. And so I didn't even know that there would be a connection. But Alan, another thing that you said that I think is really important that connects curiosity, generosity, vulnerability, and authenticity with your role as a speaker, a listener, an observer, but also this failure rejection piece. And you named it, it's just a piece, right? So like a lot of times people will ask questions that they're calling a conversation, but they're asking a question, they know the answer to it. So then when someone deviates from the script, then it's like, wait a minute, what's going on? Because you asked a question you thought you knew the answer to and there wasn't a different answer. So I always encourage, If you want to make a connection with someone, you got to do better. And what that is asking a question to which you do not know the answer at all. And when you do that, then I think, Alan, that's what you said made me think of, is that when you ask a question, you legitimately do not know the answer to this. And you like are curious. You're being generous and like providing energy and attention and space. And you're shut your face and you're being vulnerable and authentic because you actually have no idea what is about to happen. You are actually present with that person in that moment, even if they say what you predicted. You hear it differently. You feel it and connect in a different way. And I feel like what was very surprising to me is that space is also very commonly described as when people have failed, or when people are rejected or have a pattern of rejection. Is that same kind of like, if I'm not very good with emotions or being emotionally available, I have a shrink. But like if emotions are different seasonings on the shelf, like the go-to seasoning, when you have that moment of actually having no idea what is about to happen, it is the same seasoning of, oh my gosh, I have no idea what's about to happen. And so there's a connection between that openness and this like failure or rejection because you weren't expecting it. So one of the questions I always ask businesses, and I might be getting a little ahead of the questions, is that how are you rewarding trying? How are you rewarding failure? Because if you can tolerate some certain level of failing but trying, or trying to try that results in failure or rejection, there's an engagement that's there that encourages me to be innovative or creative or to try. But rewarding too much failure may look like allowing people to be lazy and having too strict of expectations of what success is defined as may be really micromanaging and limiting. So you have to kind of find that balance. And I find the key is that intersection of failure, rejection, openness, and real conversation that are rooted in curiosity, generosity, vulnerability, and authenticity. How does that resonate with y'all? Especially the failure and rejection piece, and how that impacts your own behaviors or your connections.
It reminds me a lot of Brene Brown and her shame and joy. You know, how she talks about how necessary it is. She also talks about, you know, that failure. It's like you have to get to that to get to joy, right?
Yeah.
You can't have just one side. That when you were talking about that, that's what it reminded me of. You got to have one to have the other.
Absolutely. And I think it was a different,
Kind of like you have to screw up to succeed.
Right. You have to try in order to begin trying, right? Yeah. When I think it was a different book club meeting, but I mentioned reading Daring Greatly by Brene Brown, and it was that exact point where I threw the book across the room, because she was saying her weird research stuff about control freak perfectionists that I did not identify with in the least. And not identifying with the control freak perfectionist thing, what I realized is that I had survived enough trauma that my response was to lock down, right? Like, we're going to do everything in my exact way so that there is no wiggle room for anything unexpected at all again. I'm going to protect other people from that unexpectedness, and I'm going to protect myself. Probably also the root of my lack of commitment issues. I'm just not even going to be friends with people. I'm certainly not going to get any relationships with people, because never again, not on my watch. No. And the truth is bad shit still happened. I am very thorough in my control freaky perfectionist. Bad shit still happened. I didn't have one bad thing happen. I had a lot of bad things happen. And even on lockdown, joy slipped in. I had weird surprises that were unexpected. I had things occur I didn't even know was going to happen. Even the subject would come up. And when I threw the book across the room, the reason I, again, was writing this book and reading all these books, trying to teach myself not to write a book. And what I realized is that I wasn't coming from a vulnerable, authentic, curious, generous place when I was trying to protect myself and others. I was closed instead of open. And even closed and hard and trying really hard not to have any friends or any commitments, I was surrounded by friends who were just waiting for me to open up. They were all there. Like, I actually had a New Year's resolution. It was on a list that I was going to make friends, to which my friends were like, fantastic. Does this mean you will return our phone calls now? Right? Because it was already happening. I was just being a shitty friend because it was already there. I had not acknowledged that seeping through the cracks of this brick wall that I put up out of protection for myself and for others, water and air still got through. Dandelions are still growing in the cracks. And some of that is really painful and some of that is really joyous. And that is actually what being alive means. So thank you, Julianne, for the shout out again, because it was a powerful connection to be making while I was reading that book and writing this book. Other thoughts, any other kind of points or anything in the book thus far, like as we head through chapter 6, any points you want to discuss or that impacted you while reading this or doing the activities that I haven't brought up that you want to talk about? Then we're going to move into holding space, which usually freaks people out. Solid. Looks it. Great. Well, let's move on to holding space. P.S. In case anyone is possibly doubting that I have 3 80-pound dogs on the other side of a door, I need you to understand that not only did my computer crash, but my computer crashed and the cheesy bone is inside my office. So in the Pettit Cannon family, I need you to understand that I am basically royalty right now because I have the cheesy bone. And if I remember the thing I tripped on right when I went to go shut the door when my computer actually restarted, I think that might actually be the bacon ring. So I'm winning and they're upset. But in good dog manner, as soon as we're done, I will hand them the 2 things and go find a third one for the third one, and they will have no memory of this at all. But if the dog barking is bothering you, there's not a damn thing I can do about it because the cheesy bone is literally underneath my foot. I am powerful. All right, holding space, similar to shutting a door and keeping the dog treats on the other side. One of the coolest things I think that comes with the words holding space. I cowered from this very similarly when I don't even think I was out yet. I came out when I was 27, but I remember a magnet on like one of my gay friends' fridge. I was very straight. I tried so hard to be straight. I was wrong. But anyway, so there was a magnet on the fridge that said "Take Pride," period, and just a dot, "Take Pride." And it was written in like that pirate font just on the fridge. And I remember that magnet and it like burned a hole into a part of me because the idea of reclaiming and taking and like pride, like that would just meant something so important to me. And when I started writing this piece of the book, I realized that this was about me being in the closet and not being out and not really being clear of who I was. And when I released that, I not only was holding space for other people or trying to hold space for other people, but I was granting myself the ability to take up space. And holding space, I think, is also at the root of ally work, advocacy work, accomplice work. Holding space is also at the root of self-reflection and realizing, as Britney Spears would say, oops, I did it again. I'm doing that thing again, that pattern thing I tried. Didn't I write a book? Didn't I do a book club? What was that called? I think she had green hair. Anyway, I did that thing again. Whoops. All of that is holding space. So when we move into like chapter 7 and chapter 8, holding space and good enough now, I wanted to land in a place that wasn't just the end of a book, right? Like, dun, 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 motivational, and this is the answer. I don't know what the answer is. I'm a disaster pants, right? But inside of holding space, I'm curious how that landed with you, and what is there about your message or your purpose or other people that you can't hold space for, or that you pretend to not know exists, right? Like what do you pretend to not know or isn't real about somebody else, or possibly yourself, or your message, or your purpose? And why do you think that is, and what is the root? And then I would like to remind you, remember, this is not about fixing, it's just about noticing. We talked about noticing just a second ago, noticing the pattern of why you might pretend to not know about a pattern in the first place. So are there things you know and you actively know that you pretend to not know about you or other people? And why?
I would say, I'm going to say in general, but I have some specifics in mind. In general, when I'm hurt, I like to pretend or forget that the person that hurt me is also hurting about something. And that's quite possibly why they hurt me, right? Because hurting people hurt people, right? And so, you know, in my own, whatever's going on in my own head, I kind of forget that this other person had an experience too. And it's, you know, could be related to middle school for them. It could be related to last week or this morning, you know, but they're having their own experience. And I, you know, get very self-focused sometimes in those moments, and just, even if I could intellectually, and sometimes I do, like, oh, they must be really hurting. I'm like, yeah, but I'm hurting, you know, right? You know, and I just still kind of think back to myself sometimes. So.
Sure. And that time travel swoosh, swoosh thing happens. So you may not even know that you're not doing it. Yeah. And one of my recent therapy appointments, because I have many, but in one of my recent therapy appointments, I said something and I feel like my shrink misinterpreted it, and then kind of like gave me a little mini TED talk on something I didn't mean. And I was raised in a family where you're really not supposed to interrupt someone. Now, I was also married someone that has a very different definition of what it means to interrupt someone. I grew up in a family where everybody can be talking at the same time, possibly even about multiple subjects without interrupting each other. But when I'm getting a TED talk at me about a subject that is not what I meant, it is not appropriate to then interrupt them and be like, no, shut up, especially when you're giving them a copay. It doesn't work out well. So what is interesting though, is that I realized I had tripped something of my shrink. And what my shrink was doing was airing something about a connection that she made between two different things that had absolutely nothing to do with what I meant to say, but they were two different things, and she needed to say that and wouldn't be able to listen to me until she got to do that, right? Then, of course, perhaps it's because that's why she's my shrink, 45 minutes later, that thing came back up because, of course, she was right, and that's actually what I needed to be talking about, but I didn't know that at the time. So in not interrupting, I listened to her, and then 45 minutes later, I realized that what she was talking about was actually helpful. But to get to that point, I then had to like slow myself down and be like, this person needs to say this. That's a different way of being like, I'm going to shut my ears off until their face stops moving, so then I can get back to what I was talking about. And it paid off, right? So anybody else have thoughts about the pretending you don't know about something that you clearly know about, that you have to actively work at pretending you don't know it?
Well, I mean, in my personal experience lately, it kind of, this holding space concept ties in for me to raising a child, right? So we're going through some really challenging times right now with tantrums and with meltdowns and all the things. She's 2, so of course, but
the kid, I thought you were talking about you, not your
yeah. Myself included. Well, here's why. It's really easy in those moments to kind of lose myself and get frustrated instead. And you have to really draw it back in and be like, okay, this tiny person is also feeling huge emotions that she doesn't know what to do with. I've known what to do with mine. I've just actively chosen to screw it all up sometimes, but this little person is freaking out and looking to us for some sort of comfort. And actually, it was happening again today, and we're trying to get through it. And I took a break. I went out to a different room, and I was kind of just looking at some videos and just kind of chilling out for a little bit. And there was actually a video of a father with a toddler, and the toddler is freaking out, having a big tantrum. And he's just sitting there next to him, allowing it to happen, allowing his emotions to just be. And then at the end of it, it's a few minutes long. And at the end of it, the child crawls up to him and he just hugs him, and it's just like this huge moment. And that video is titled Holding Space. So it makes a whole lot of sense. And so when I was looking through this particular chapter, it was drawing all sorts of things for me. But it does kind of bring to the forefront for me how much I am aware that she's having emotions, and what my tendency is to go ahead and let mine come out a little more than they should. But then I have to really sit back and hold space for her to have hers first, so that we can really kind of come around and figure out how to make that a much easier situation for all of us and move forward from it.
So number one, I'm going to need the link to that video, because number two, I'm going to need my husbando to watch it many times over, because just because I'm having a meltdown does not mean it's your fault. Or I have a lot of these conversations where like I'm being told I'm mad at him. You want to know the fastest way for me to get mad at you is to tell me I'm mad at you, because you're now right. You weren't earlier, but now spot on. So I should probably maybe watch it a couple times and probably give it to him as well. That'd be great, because sometimes I just need to flip out. I'm an external processor sheltering in place in 1,200 square feet with 3 80-pound dogs who don't shut the hell up. And then I'm married to an introvert who doesn't speak. What am I supposed to do? I used to have applause on a daily basis. I had to have like a team meeting, and yes, I'm going to need to know, Jessica did the laundry this week. Come on, I need you to tweet. I need you to quote me. I need some validation here. I've gotten a little better. COVID's still real, so here we are. All of this, and Dara, thank you so much for sharing that, because what I think is important is the history that's here. So Anita, you mentioned Crucial Conversations, which of the 4 books, which I'm not throwing under the bus, I just needed to read in order to write my own, which are Difficult Conversations, Fierce Conversations, Courageous Conversations, and Crucial Conversations. Of the 4 books, not gonna lie, Crucial Conversations was my favorite. It was the one that I was like, hey, I got more work to do. And what is incredible is, of the book, my favorite sentence is, every sentence has a history. Now, if you take sentences and you also put them as the ones that come out of your face or come out of their faces, right? Or every sentence has a history that's a text message, or the use of an emoji or a GIF or an email or a letter. Some people still write letters. I like letters. But when you start to actually think that every phraseology that is being lobbed at you, or that you have heard someone else say, I find that when I struggle to find grace, so Julianne, you talked about grace again, and I mentioned your comment actually from Canvas the other day as well. But when you're able to realize that what is happening right now has a history that I am not even entitled to know about, then I somehow, sometimes, occasionally, every once in a while, cannot pretend I don't notice that that is actually allowing some grace, right? Like I consciously realize that oh man, what did this person survive that makes their life go, oh wait, this is how I should show up. Because if it's a conscious choice, that's one thing. But there are unconscious choices that your sense of self are employing because it makes them feel safe and prepared. And when somebody is doing what they doing and you realize that there is a history that is informing that you are not entitled to, then you can work on being conscious of holding that space, recognizing that history, and that history, this is the hard part, that history has nothing to do with you. It's not you. It's called differentiation. I'm saving you another copay. Differentiation means their stuff is their stuff, and their stuff may be occurring next to you. What a beautiful image there, right? Like their stuff may be occurring right here, and that could be bringing up all kinds of things for you, and now your stuff is happening right here. The space of grace is to allow both of those whirling dervishes to exist. And then I just invite you to occasionally stumble into a sense of responsibility for your own. That ultimately is good enough now, right? Like you're doing the best you can with what you got some of the time. That's it. Every once in a while, go, oh, I hate that book, right? You're nailing it. That's amazing. Throw it across the room. It's great. If every sentence has a history, now what I want you to do is I want you to go back in time. And by back in time, I mean 49 minutes or more ago. And I want you to ask yourself, is there an example when you reflect back over a missed connection where what were some other options that could have existed that you hadn't considered? And by missed connection, I mean those conversations you play in your head over and over again, just for funsies. You don't have to disclose super details, but is there another possibility that could have been happening for the other person that could be real, that is very different than how you left that missed connection, understanding what happened?
I'd like to speak to that because one of the things that you just said that just really sparked it for me was we're not entitled to that story. Because I know, I was going to say I think, but I know that sometimes I convince myself, oh, if I could understand that story, I could understand why they're doing, and that's bullshit. I mean, just because I would know that story doesn't mean that I would know how they got to this space, because we all travel through our own traumas in different ways, right? And so for me, letting go of that entitlement in my head, because first of all, some people don't know about it, haven't acknowledged it themselves. They don't want to talk about it. There's 400 other things. And the bottom line is it really doesn't make a difference. It's just, to me, it's just another excuse to not have the behavior I need.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so I really like that you use that word entitled. And what I do is I recognize it every day when I'm listening to stories on the news or people talking about what's, friends of mine, what's going on in their lives. I'm much more aware of how impactful, whether they have cancer or their kids didn't get in college or their kids are doing great in college or, whatever. There's a whole gambit of different situations, but how impactful that is on everyone's life. And it has nothing to do with me. That's my rail, if you will, right? That's where I get off the track. And somebody else was talking about that. I think it was Anita. When somebody else hurts you, like a lot of times it doesn't have anything. So they're not really hurting you, right? They didn't get up in the morning and say, oh, I'm going to cut off Julianne on the highway. Like that's not what they did. So it's remembering that. Anyway,
yeah, I think it's really, really important. And what is interesting, and I actually wrote about this in this month's newsletter, but the January 6th storming of the Capitol, I think is how we're kind of referring to that episodic situation that I can't get out of my eyeballs. And there was a moment that in the video where there was what I would call a white man carrying a Blue Lives Matter flag, like the black and white US American flag with one blue stripe, carrying this giant Blue Lives Matter flag. And he like marches right up fairly aggressively. So I'm not going to use the word walk, but like marches up to a police officer. And I can't hear what they say, but the police officer pushes them back. And I am writing a story, watching this video, that he was in that moment was just like, but I'm carrying a Blue Lives Matter flag. Like, you, a police officer, I'm on your side. What are you pushing me back for? What is going on? So like, it's like that long. And the guy takes his flag, not the police officer, but the man carrying the flag, takes his own flag and rips it to shreds, and then starts chanting to F the police. And it was that long. And I just remember thinking like, first off, there are people you disagree with that use those words and you're agreeing with each other. And I don't know if storming the Capitol is the time for you to really come over to that side, but we'll take you. It's not even an application process. Let's come over here and talk about like removing the militarization of the police. We don't need to become a police state. Like, we could do that, right? Like, okay, I didn't know I was going to have this conversation with you, but I don't know that in the moment that's what was happening. And I also very much felt such empathy for moments when things that I believed in, I was deeply wrong about, or at least felt deeply wronged by new information, right? So I remember distinctly, if we stay on police officers, for example, I remember police officers were always good. They're always the good people, right? So I am an upper class white person who grew up in a gated community. So the police officers are the people who delivered your Girl Scout cookies. Now I'm just saying, FYI, dear police officers, good community move. Deliver them Girl Scout cookies. It worked great. So I'm like, oh, I don't know, I respect authority. Girl Scout cookies, there's a connection to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. This is working out great. So fast forward, I'm working at NYU, and there is a protest against the invasion of Iraq right after 9/11. So this is in the early 2000s because I'm old. And then the protest that was happening in Washington Square Park, I was all mama bear and my little students were all around me, very excited. And a police officer on a horse came up and shot a student of mine with a rubber bullet, point blank range, and broke her glasses. And I literally was like, the police have hurt Helen. And like, that's all it took. That maybe there's more going on with this power dynamic that I am unaware of. But Mama Bear came out, and we want to talk about some authority situation. I was very angry that one of my students had been shot at point blank range with a rubber bullet and it broke her glasses. Spoiler alert, because I know people like to know this. I ran into her at an airport. Remember airports? She's doing fine. But anyway, I am not doing fine. And that moment is a crucible moment in my life. And I'm assuming that moment is a crucible moment in that guy's life. That moment might be a crucible moment in that police officer's life, either of them. That moment might have been a crucible moment in Helen's life. And because I am myself and I bumped into Helen, this is the first thing I asked if she's doing okay. I like noticed her glasses, like decades have passed. And she had almost no idea what I was talking about because she does a lot of activism. And that was clearly not the first or the last time she's had any kind of altercation, because she's like, can you remind me which pair of glasses got broken? Oh, Washington Square. Which one in Washington Square Park? Her crucible moment was not a crucible moment. It is a crucible moment for me. And that's where my responsibility comes in, right? I'm responsible for what I took away because that was something that was super important to me that is now shaping who and how I am, which gets to Difficult Conversations, which is the other book. So it references authenticity, but not as something you have, it's something you choose. So even sharing that story, there's a lot going on in that story that I just shared, but there's a lot going on in here, and like, welcome to my head. That's what every crucible moment that I'm conscious or unconscious of is happening, plus the stuff I edited and didn't even share you, right? Okay, so if authenticity isn't something you have, it's something you choose. How would this impact your ability to engage with other people? How, if this is impacting your ability to engage, how does it also impact your ability to listen or connect with other people, or, spoiler alert, connect with yourself? If authenticity is something you choose.
So I feel like having my daughter's 10 and we're 3 streets away from where I grew up. And, you grow up with that certain mindset of, this is how life is. We moved back to this area for the schools. And what I'm finding is I'm not liking the mentality that's in the schools. Is probably very similar to when I was growing up, but I'm finding those moments where my daughter comes home upset. She was told to put on a different shirt the other day because they felt it was too risque, that there was a cutout in the back of the shirt and that it would give boys the wrong idea. I lit up, I did not know some of those things were in me. And what I'm finding interesting is when I have these conversations with her about, okay, if the school says it's not okay, fine, we'll follow that rule. There's nothing wrong with your shirt. Other people's actions are on them. But then when I watch my mom's reaction, she's agreeing with the schools. And what I'm feeling is maybe we need to move to a different neighborhood where there's bigger issues than if there's a cutout in the back of our shirt, that she's fully clothed, fully appropriate. And so I'm finding these reactions that are going against what I was brought up with, this certain idea of what's okay, what's not okay, and these, I'll say, almost 50s norms of this is how the household is run, and this is, boys are allowed to behave a certain way towards females, and that's an acceptable behavior, and starting to see it at such a young age and be pervasive in these educators teaching her that the male students are not responsible for their actions, and it's her job to make sure they don't look at her inappropriately. I was like, one, she's 10. What is she going to wear that's all that inappropriate? But my initial reaction is I wanted to yank her out of the school. If that's how they're going to teach my daughter, I want her to be in a school where they're teaching her about real things. Let's talk about the classmates who don't have food coming in to their houses. And it's been so transformational in our lives. Just these different things happening and these reactions coming out of me that I've known what's been good and bad and the privilege that I've grown up in, but starting to see this mentality continue is very frustrating to me, because I would have thought by now some of those, I'll call them old school thoughts, would have been pushed out with some of these, different movements that are going around through the country. And yet I have my 10-year-old daughter coming home feeling body shamed and upset at what she's been wearing. And we had some very hard discussions. And I said, there's nothing wrong with this. We're going to move forward, but I will consider how we're going to move forward with your education if this is what is going to happen.
Well, and Hillary, if I remember correctly, please correct me if I'm wrong, but you identified at the beginning of this process somewhere around the head, heart-ish kind of space. Am I correct about that?
Yes.
Right? Like you like to gather the information and you like review everything. And then I'm sure there's like an appropriate process and like, okay, great. You messed with my daughter. I'm yanking that kid out of school. What the hell's wrong with you? Right now, I will follow the rule. But you've now tapped into all of who you are, literally 3 blocks away from where you became who you are.
Yeah.
And that's where all 3 variables can show up, right? And that's what it does. There is nothing a school going to say. If you actually decide to remove your daughter, your school's not going to be like, well, how about we put a mural up? That's not going to work, because you will have made a decision from all 3 places and you are donezo, right? But
Yeah.
that's how you can notice those variables coming into play. So it was cool to listen. I mean, I know you so well that it was so cool to hear like think, boom, happened, right? So that's awesome. Same thing happened with me when I go back to police in Helen, right? Is that I am a head action person. So I'm like making sure people are like, you know, protesting safely and have a phone number to call if they get arrested. And then somebody messed with one of my students and it began an entire questioning process of justice and authority. Hi, heart part. How are you? Ooh. So I invite more of that. That's good stuff. Good stuff. Anybody else have anything they want to share? All right. Oh, Jax, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was. So I had an interesting experience last night. I was asked to do a presentation for some entrepreneurs who are just starting their businesses, right? And they're all in the diversity and inclusion field. And every single one of them talked about processes. And I was like, oh my God, nothing could be more boring to me as a career. And it's like, what it affirmed to me was like, oh, I really am an action head person. That heart thing, that can just like, so when you were saying that about the heart, oh yeah, it's there. I'm thinking, yeah, that's kind of what happened to me last night. I was like, no, yeah, I don't want to go there. I'll stay with my head and my action because that's predictable and I can control that. Heart stuff scares the bejesus out of me because I cannot control it.
Unless, dear friend, it's what you get from yoga and meditation. Ah, look at your third piece showing up. This is the danger of being in your friend's book club, right? So yeah, you can head action all over the place, but something happens to you in your yoga experiences and the communities that you belong to that utilize breath and movement to connect yourself to yourself and to the planet and the ground and centering yourself. Don't tell me you ain't got no heart parts.
I do.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you very much. Okay, so now here's the big question. Finale. Here we go. You may remember I talked about crossing the three streams and my favorite movie, Ghostbusters. For the record, because everyone always yells at me, I appreciated the women's version of Ghostbusters, but largely only because there were cameos of all the original Ghostbusters. Ghostbusters is one of my favorite movies in the whole wide world. I got to speak at Comic-Con in San Diego, had never heard of it. I got to see the Ghostbuster mobile and I touched a proton pack. I don't even remember speaking. They could have just not even paid me if I had gotten to wear a proton pack. People, know your audience. Anyway, I digress. You may recall in the movie Ghostbusters, they say that you can't cross the streams because honestly, they don't know what's going to happen. Spoiler alert, if you cross the streams, you get to kill Zool, and it works. So I wanted to keep that going, and that we often, when we do self-reflection work, self-help work, whatever, better connections, conversations. So when I read difficult, fierce, crucial, and courageous conversations, I'm a very compartmentalized person, but there's this and this and this and this, and then you're done. Thank you. And it felt like this manipulative Jedi skill thing. And so what I want to do is I want us to encourage ourselves to keep doing this work. And in order to actually make progress, you have to cross the streams. So I'm going to review what the streams are. And then I want you to just take a second. Which streams are easier for you to put together? And then which one dangles? Maybe all three are easy. Maybe you're a bento box like me, and they're distinctively different conversations you have at different times with different people. So, of the three streams to cross, which causes the greatest challenge for you personally and why? How might you create a situation to allow yourself to utilize that particular stream that you're not crossing? That's the big question. To review, as a reminder, the first stream is taking responsibility for your own lived experiences and who and how you are as you show up, as well as the stories that you write about others. Taking responsibility for who and how you are. Stream one. Second stream, recognizing that others are complicated. and have survived a lot in order to be present with you right now, and therefore are worthy of the benefit of doubt. It might be shocking to you, but that's really hard for me for some people. Okay, that's number 2. Number 3 is claiming the opportunity to have conversations that matter. And that claiming that opportunity to have conversations that matter is the only way better connections will be made. If those are the 3, making better connections are the way to have conversations that matter. People have this like history and lived experience that doesn't have anything to do with me. And I am responsible for who and how I am in the world. Those are the 3 streams. I'm curious, are there some that are much easier for you? Are there some that are much harder for you, and why?
So the difficult conversations are hard for me. I feel like I'm always giving people the benefit of the doubt to the point that it degrades what needs to happen. So I need to do a better job of having those difficult conversations and giving myself the space and the tools to, one, think through it before I have the conversation, so I have a plan. Because sometimes those difficult conversations, when I start them, they start to veer off a little bit. And if I'm not prepared to bring it back on course, it doesn't ever fix whatever we're trying to fix. And that's been a big focus for me at work. It's easier at home because it's myself and a child. So those are much easier, difficult conversations. Whereas dealing with adults and creating boundaries and setting the expectations for others, it's harder for me to have those difficult conversations because I want to give them the benefit of the doubt.
And Hillary, I'm going to nudge you as a place to think.
Yes.
Remember that doing this work, and I'm not a parent, so I've had parents argue with me. So maybe this doesn't apply to your own child, at least not yet, except it could, but okay. Remember that doing this work isn't about fixing. It's about noticing and noticing the pattern of why you might be the way you are, why you might pretend to not know things that you do know, why you might be bringing things up when you don't mean to, the time travel of being curious, generous, vulnerable, authentic, and crucible moments in your life. I too am a fixer. And sometimes the best way to fix something is to begin the habit of noticing it. So I'm just going to run a reminder because fixing is hard. What else? Anybody else got something? How are you? Patty, how are you doing? You are being extra talkative tonight.
I know, really. Because there's a lot of thoughts going through my head. What I find, to me, to take responsibility for how I show up in the world and live life is leadership. And I've been doing that I became aware of that when I started studying leadership. And so I've been doing that. And so that it has come easier for me. And others are complicated. I can do that most of the time. But when I get really pissed off at somebody, then I don't give them very much grace. So that is an opportunity. But the claiming the opportunity to have those conversations is my go-to is to just be silent, and to be able to have better conversations that matter is something that I would really like to strive and do better at. And yeah, and then it circles back to, but I don't want to fail, so then I'll just sit here and be quiet.
And I would just throw this out to you. If silence equals failure, then in having a conversation, then silence is also a great conversation piece. Let's go back to the holding space video. The parent could be like scolding the kid for how they're throwing a temper tantrum, or they could just be sitting there in silence. That is a connection. Remember, if we're aiming for better connections, conversations do not have to involve words. again, I'm saving you a copay at a marriage therapist.
Ooh.
However, if you're going to use words, then you need to allow them to also have space to have words. And when you are like, I don't know what to do, so I'm going to be quiet, you've made a choice of what your actions are going to be. And you're trying. I'm going to throw some words out there and see if it works. That is also an action-based choice. Is that helpful?
So if I heard you correctly, like being silent is my choice. And to me, the connection being silent is then I am just in that space of noticing. It's like, oh, isn't this interesting? I don't know what to say. So it's that noticing part, the space that I'm in. But I really would like to have more conversations that have meaning and matter. And maybe give myself a little bit of grace too. So yes, that is very helpful. Thank you.
Perfect. Great. I think Julianne, you were going to say something, and then Alan, I'm coming for you next.
Okay, yeah, I really like having those difficult conversations, but I need a lot of work on the second stream, so those conversations are better. It's like, one doesn't exist without the other. So when people are complicated, and I need to give them space for their own complication without it really relating to me and all the other stuff we've talked about. And so the end result of those conversations would be a whole lot more fruitful for me and probably for them if I would work on the second stream more.
What an excellent way. Then just don't throw everything out. You don't have to reformat the hard drive. You're just like, oh, that middle thing. All right. Great. Excellent. Okay, Alan, how are you doing over there?
Yeah, for me, I think it's actually the first one that's the most difficult. I feel like I don't bring my full self into it. So something interesting to think about.
Interesting. And notice that if Alan, yours is the first string about bringing your full self in or not, that is different than Patty choosing to be silent because she doesn't know how to have a conversation that matters in that given moment. That's string 3, right? Your full self, like Patty, your full self could be present and you're choosing not to have a conversation because you don't know how to do it right, right? So that's string 3, but string 1 is there. And if you bring this up to noticing, now you're fully present and you are having a connection that matters that might not be an exchange of words. Alan, you have disclosed that what I hear is like a holding space of yourself and how that's valuable to other people. And that by being able to show up, you can actually like do those things, right? Like if we pull in Brene Brown, it's like actually getting out into the arena is the action-oriented piece. I am very similar, but the opposite. I'm much more comfortable being dead center in attention. And I've had to learn that that's my defense mechanism. I learned that if I can over disclose just a little bit more than you're comfortable with, you will never ask me a follow-up question. Right? But it's the same issue. So if I actually reveal less, that seemed to ring true for a little too many people. If I can like hold back, I'm actually more present. Then look how present I am, and you not actually being there, right? Both can be a defense mechanism and a protective place. So I appreciate you saying that. And I think that you're doing a great job at it, and noticing it is really key. Yeah, thanks, Alan. Anita, what about you? And then Dara, we'll go with you.
Well, for me, I think it really depends on the context. And I've been doing a lot of reflection about some of my more intimate personal relationships. And I think, again, partly related to the stories and the narratives and, what happened decades ago or what happened last week. I think the hardest for me sometimes is in my shorthand, it's the taking responsibility for what I'm bringing in that moment. And you all might not be surprised to hear that when I said earlier, you know, having a hard time remembering that the other person is hurting too. So, and I think I wrote in one of my reflection pieces that if you know, I'm realizing like if I can't be vulnerable because I'm afraid to be hurt, well, then I'm not really bringing my whole self. And so anyway,
Mm.
it's all mixed together. The streams are kind of mixed together, but that's probably the first one that's hardest, at least in some of the relationships I'm thinking of.
Sure. And I would throw out for you as well, again, because I know you so well, is that I think that it is possible, and who am I other than just somebody sitting next to you on a bus, except we've known each other for 1,000 years because we're both 20. But what I would
Right.
what I would challenge you to do is that you focusing on how people are hurting, that caretaker nature of you is a beautiful, wonderful part of your spirit. And if you take care of somebody enough, they might not reject you and you might not fail, is a very like yucky cycle to trip yourself into,
Mhm.
right? And so like notice when
Right.
I would suggest when you're like, oh, maybe they're hurting, right? Like that might be your defense mechanism, because then you find out where their bruises are,
Mhm.
right? And if you find out where their bruises are, then don't touch them. Then you're less likely to get rejected or failure, right? So I'm very proud of you for saying that, like, no, I need to work on what I'm responsible for, because that's you and that's you being present, and there you are. And if you're being vulnerable enough to risk failure or rejection, you at least know how you're entering that space.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's a good point.
You're welcome. Sorry, I've known you for so long. Okay, Dara.
I don't think it's 1,000 years. I think it's like half a millennia.
Inside of COVID, the fact that it's the end of January, hasn't it already been like
Well, yeah.
9 months and 1 week at the same time? What is 1,000 years?
Well, true. Like January 2021 is really like 20 years of normal time. So yeah, sure. Yeah.
Right. Right. How long are Girl Scout cookies good for? 1,000 years if you put them in the freezer and then you forget about them because they're under frozen things. I found a box of Thin Mints from God knows when. Great. Perfect. Magic. You are my Thin Mints. All right.
I would say, I mean, back in the beginning of this, I had stated that my situation had changed and therefore certain attributes for me had changed. So, the thing that I'm struggling the most with lately would be how I'm showing up and taking responsibility for my actions, along with, you know, leaving space for the other person to be able to, or the situation to be able to hold space for it and recognize that it's its own experience. They're having their own lived experience there. I can have the difficult conversations. I have absolutely no problem with that. But Anita, you kind of said the same thing where it's all mixed up. And that's where I am right now. I'm all over the place. I think the majority of the people that I'm close to are also all over the place right now. We're all kind of experiencing that. And there's just a huge shift happening. But I would say in general, I've always been one that's able to really kind of see another's experience and really get myself into that, and respect it and kind of be responsible for myself and be very aware of how I'm interacting with them. But lately I've noticed that has been much more difficult for me. And that's something that I definitely want to be bringing back in. And then there's also, you know, having the difficult conversations that seem to come up a lot more often now because we're all having our own difficult situations too. So, you know, it's mine are all mixed up, but I would say, you know, the first two generally are much easier for me. But right now I think the third one's nudging in there.
Well, and I will add, because I've now heard this twice, when they're all mixed up, if any of you heard some kind of self-inflicted judgment that it's all mushed together and I don't know, and I smush schmachka together. So that is very classic heart action kind of responses, because like I've told you there are 3 of them and you're like, well, it kind of feels like mashed potato-y. right? So a head action person would be like this kind of potato, this kind of butter, this kind of milk-like substance, right? And a heart action person, you may very well be stuck in mashed potatoes. It's all the same thing, right? Like they don't even have to be numbered in this order. It's just the order I typed them in. Who cares? Just notice them and stop judging yourself and eat more potatoes. It's all good. You're nailing it, I promise. All right, Jax, do you have any thoughts or comments about your streams or threads?
Oh, my most difficult one would definitely be the thing about seeing other people and letting them be where they're at, because
I think it's called empathy.
well, okay, that might be the word.
Let me Google it really quick. Hold on. Okay.
Yeah, no, that is seriously, because like you do not know how many times I've sat in my therapist's office working on, well, because I think it's a good idea, they should think it's a good idea too. I've spent years in therapy on that one issue in my personality. So it's pretty much going to be that one. It's my challenge.
Awesome. Great. And I would like to point out, as another head action person, if they just did it our way, it would be correct and right.
Absolutely.
Duh. Right. But these therapists need job security. So they just give everybody else really terrible advice to like find their own path or whatever. There's one path. It's the one I'm standing on, but they have to pay their rent. So here we go. Yeah. Thank you very much for sharing. I appreciate it. So that's the end of the questions for now. So then my parting question for everyone, and you don't have to answer it, but if you'd like to, this is your time to be held accountable, is what are you going to do now?
I'm going to review my notes, and I think I'd like to come back to Canvas every month.
Mhm.
And kind of, I know this last part I didn't make. I was almost at half. I didn't make the time to write in, so at some point I will. But I enjoy reading everybody else's too. So for me, I think what I'm going to do is pop in every month and just kind of go through a review, because something will come to top of mind. I can't have it all on my top of my mind, or I won't have a mind. So I think it'll be a great repository for reflection and review.
Excellent. Thank you. Anybody else got what they're going to do now?
I'm going to go back through as well, because I feel like I was kind of speed reading. I know some people read a book a week, and when I see those people posting in December, I'm just like, I can't, and so I want to go back through and take a little more time on some of the concepts that I highlighted, and just do a little more processing. And I really regret that I missed last week, so I just feel like I got kind of out of rhythm with it. So that's what I'm going to do. It pairs so well with Crucial Conversations, so I kind of want to keep doing them together and putting them together.
Excellent. Well, and if only you were friends with the author, because then you could read at your own pace and like send her a text message and see if you have any thoughts or comments.
Just call her up, maybe.
Yeah. Strange.
I might do that.
Anybody else have a now you need to declare in the group? Well, I will add that part of my process of going through this with you is I have come up with my kind of New Year's resolution for myself. So I, of course, come up with all my business ones first, and then school ones, and then relationship ones are in there somewhere, because you have to like fill in the whole sheet of paper. So then I was like, okay, if I'm leading this book club, like what is the thing I'm going to do this year? And the language that I'm using is this is my declaration, you can hold me accountable to this, but I'm going to give myself the level of customer service I would give a client. And what that means to me is that if a client calls me I am available. They send me an email. I'm like upset if I don't respond within like minutes. Even on Pacific Coast time, I wake up for East Coast time just in case. What if someone needs something? And I'm going to give myself that level of customer service. And what that means is I'm taking my vitamins and I'm drinking water and I'm taking these noisy beasts on dog walks. And I, for the very first time in a very long time, did not finish a to-do list on Friday. Did you hear the rumble in the universe on Friday? That was me leaving things on my to-do list, not just on a to-do list, but on a Friday's to-do list. And you know what? That shit was done by Wednesday and they didn't even notice. It's fine. So that is the good enough now, doing the best I can with what I got some of the time, because it's better than nothing never mojo that I am bringing into 2021. And I don't think I would have gotten there without y'all actually like helping me through this process, especially as the author person. Part of the reason the second edition took so long is I had a vigorous ongoing argument with the author because she was an idiot and didn't know what she was talking about. And I don't know that I would have been able, especially while sheltering in place, not gotten through the process with this external processing piece, not been a part of it. So thank you very much for helping me be kinder to me. Ooh. There you go. I said thank you. Shut up. So any other thoughts or comments? Then I say,
I just,
go ahead.
and we are friends, so of course I'm biased, but I want to say thank you for doing this, because not all authors of books spend their Friday late afternoon evenings talking about their book with people. And that could be a profound thing in the world if authors did that. So I just really appreciate you for doing it.
No, thanks.
I learned a lot from the discussion, so thank you.
Yeah, thank you too. This was a strange thing. There were definitely some Fridays where I was like, I have to do what? Whose idea was it? But it was always great. And it always ends in Mexican food truck dinner, which is waiting for me. So you are good enough now. I super promise. Visit Canvas, do what Julianne said, do it again, over and over again. Just lurk. Town's great. That's what the whole point of the Canvas community is. Also, tell a friend, right? I plan on doing this again. So once we get another like group together, I'll send out more dates. And if you want to come back, you're welcome to. I won't even tell people that you've done it before. So thank you very much. Happy 2021.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Oh, look, good enough now.
Super worth it. If you haven't bought the book, go buy the book. It's fantastic.
Oh, thank
To
you.
everybody who's not in this group.
Thank you. Ah!